this is more of a market infrastructure play than it is a crypto play. We just happen to be using blockchain technology because, like the rest of the market, we believe that has a lot of benefits from a market efficiency perspective in terms of the way trading can happen when you're using blockchain technology. So it's really important that the legal and governance structure here is we focus in on that, because you are trading the spot commodity, and from a regulatory perspective, what this is spot commodity trading. You aren't trading a crypto asset in the sense of it's not like it's a dog token or whatever else, right? This is actually, and you'll see, we have very strong alignment from a price perspective with the underlying spot price that's available from various feeds, because it is just the physical material.
Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of Triangle Investor Interviews. I'm your host Lucian Valkovic, and before I announce my guest, just a reminder of a disclaimer. This interview and all my interviews are not a recommendation to buy or sell any shares, products or services. Always do your due diligence and consult with your financial advisor. My guest today is Head of Commercial Applications at Realitech, Mr. Ben Elvidge. Ben, great to have you back on the show.
Thank you for having me back. It's great to be talking to you today.
Same here, Ben. I brought you back today because I wanted to address investors' questions about tokenized uranium. I wrote a post on X few weeks ago, asking people to give their pros and cons of investing in tokenized uranium. So I really hope that we can cover this today. Maybe we should start. There are a lot of questions. Why not just invest in SPUT physical uranium trust SPUT? What is the advantage, if any, of course, of XU308 over SPUT? Tell me more.
Yeah, so look, I think, it has to be said, and, the numbers don't lie, that the SPUT physical uranium trust, or SPUT, is an excellent product. You don't gather $5 billion worth of assets without being a strong product that fits a market need. But it is designed as a closed-ended fund, and that comes with some drawbacks in our view. So, you get management fees, of course. The premium or typically discount to NAV is also an issue that you have to be prepared to grapple with. And of course, as we think about what we're intending to do with XU308, there's no option to redeem for physical uranium either, because you're holding shares of the closed-ended fund. So XU308 is different in a number of ways. So first and foremost, you get all the benefits of tokenization. So fractional ownership, close to instant settlement, and global 24/7 access subject to prevailing sanctions regimes and things like that. And what's really interesting, I think, is redemption's also possible. So as we look to grow beyond where we've seen the initial interest in the retail market into more of the kind of players within the nuclear supply chain, utilities, brokers, fuel buyers, etc. If they do want to take delivery, they can, assuming they've got a converter account. And if an investor wants to trade peer-to-peer, they can as well. So, we've got 4 live trading venues now that are globally accessible in the main. So we think that, SPUT will remain an important player, but tokenization broadens the toolkit in terms of different players accessing the market. So I think our view is it's not a direct replacement per se, but it certainly complements and provides some interesting alternative benefits that you don't get through investing in SPUT. I think in short, that's it. So just to summarize that, while SPUT's a closed-ended vehicle with no physical redemption and the impact of wider equity beta effects across the market, which we've seen at different times around nuclear, which can have a positive or negative effect, and you get that effect of the premium and discount. With XU308, it's sort of direct, fractional, beneficial ownership of physical uranium, where there's verifiable reserves kind of available on our website. You can access that and trade that 24/7, and potentially you can take physical delivery for those buyers that do have a kind of converter account. So in short, broad fund exposure, SPUT does a fairly decent job over the long term. Shorter term periods, we see that it's sort of, there are some correlation mismatches, but XU308 kind of brings that programmable, auditable ownership that's linked to the physical assets on, and makes that available, as well as, which we'll be announcing in short order, additional capabilities sort of using XU308 for collateral, for borrowing and things like that. So there's really exciting utility you get from being on using blockchain technology behind being supported by physical uranium.
Yeah, good overview. One other question that I got, maybe more than 10 of my followers asked, and said that token is not a security. And what happens if the token producer goes belly up?
Yeah, look, I think that's a really important question, and something that I think we answer and face into a lot, and it's great to have the opportunity to talk about it. So, governance and custody are everything in commodities, and everything when it comes to investing in any sort of token and understanding those dynamics. So in the specific case of XU308, the physical uranium itself isn't sat on our balance sheet, so it's not directly tied to our performance. There's actually a structure around, there's a legal structure, a trust framework around the material itself, which is stored at Cameco and held in trust by our FCA regulated sort of partner Archax. And so what that means is, to use the terminology that you use there, if we did, and we don't envisage that happening anytime soon or ever, hopefully, if we did go belly up, then actually you still own the physical title and beneficial ownership to that uranium associated with your XU308 holding. And so the claim survives even if we disappear. So the way to think about it is potentially more like a warehouse receipt than a share certificate. So we're not creating new assets and then issuing tokens for that new asset. It really is your receipt or register of ownership of the physical material, which again, our proof of reserves are on the website. And that's a big difference from a lot of the other quote unquote crypto projects where the commodity is there, isn't there in some cases, and it's more about price speculation. This is all sort of about improving the market infrastructure and trading efficacy around physical uranium.
Yeah, I will quote one of my followers who said, "My biggest concern is that tokenizing uranium would bring all the crypto fraud to the uranium market and uranium investors." How do you address that?
I think, again, it's not an unreasonable question if you look at it through the lens of crypto, right? But what we keep reinforcing is that this is more of a market infrastructure play than it is a crypto play. We just happen to be using blockchain technology because, like the rest of the market, we believe that has a lot of benefits from a market efficiency perspective in terms of the way trading can happen when you're using blockchain technology. So it's really important that the legal and governance structure here is we focus in on that, because you are trading the spot commodity, and from a regulatory perspective, what this is spot commodity trading. You aren't trading a crypto asset in the sense of, it's not like it's a dog token or whatever else, right? This is actually, you'll see, we have very strong alignment from a price perspective with the underlying spot price that's available from various feeds, because it is just the physical material. And if you own the tokens, that's your receipt of ownership or beneficial ownership of that physical material. And so FTX, those kind of scenarios and the kind of fraud that your follower references, those failures really happen for two reasons. One, the assets weren't necessarily there in certain cases because they'd been synthetically traded over and over in different ways. And at the same time, there wasn't really the strong governance controls that you would expect and need to have. And so in our case, the tokens, we quite clearly and transparently relate to what one token equals in terms of that physical uranium held at Cameco. Those reserves are kind of verifiable through the statements that we provide on our website, and we're very transparent about that. And so it's simply just a means of creating more efficient trading than what exists in the OTC market currently. And so going back to our the earlier question, the response to that, right? Because it is a register or receipt of beneficial ownership, if something happens to us as an organization or anything like that, that uranium doesn't disappear. And so there is your sort of token holders still have that claim on the physical material that's held in storage. And again, if there's anything going on at the physical material layer, I think we as an industry have a bigger problem, right? Given there's only a number of converters out there that are verifying the uranium is there and taking accountability for all of the aspects about reconciling that physical material.
Yeah, there is a stigma, if I may call it that way, from the first attempt of uranium tokenization. It was done prior by a company called Madison Metals. I was on social media back then as well. There were a lot of talk about this, that is a fraud, etc. So how would you address that compared to your product today?
Yeah, I think the big difference is what is being tokenized, right? I think is the first question around tokenization that anyone should ask themselves. And in the case of again, from my understanding and what was widely reported, in the case of the Madison Metals attempt, obviously last year they shut down that joint venture as well, citing lack of traction. It's a different conversation. But in terms of actually what was being tokenized, it was material that was not yet available, still in the ground, and then going to be made available based on a forward sales agreement. And, in short, it was really a means to raise capital to fund further exploration efforts in Namibia that was backed and, tokenizing then a partial ownership of a forward sales agreement. So you've got a level of risk embedded in the off-chain agreement or the off-chain legal title that only becomes valuable at the point at which that uranium is successfully mined and delivered, right? So the difference we have is almost being the complete opposite of that, is that our starting point was, well, how do we get the physical material first? How do we work with partners to manage that? How do we build an infrastructure that enables us to buy the initial amount of physical material, verify that, provide a verified access to that through the statements we provide on our website, and store that at Cameco. So that took a long time. Anyone that's been through the process of opening a converter account knows that takes a long time. But we've done all of that. So people can rest assured that if they're buying XU308, that is the beneficial ownership commensurate to the amount of tokens they have of the physical material. But what's also really important about that is that the structure we've built also enables those people in the supply chain and those primary, users, whether they're miners or fuel buyers or brokers or utilities, if they've got a surplus inventory, they can actually use our framework to tokenize that and access what we think will be a growing liquidity pool in the future.
Okay, got it. Uranium is already in short supply, as we know. Wouldn't tokenization lock up even more of material? I mean, that's good for investors and producers, but it means less supply on the market. How exactly would redemption work here?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we haven't had anyone yet. As I said, the focus has been very retail oriented. We haven't had anyone request physical redemption right now. But essentially, it's a very straightforward process where we need to verify who you are as a person or a corporate entity. We need to verify that you've got a converter account with Cameco in the first instance. And then we basically instruct a book transfer. We burn your tokens that you've got and deliver the physical material into the converter account that you've specified, subject to you passing KYC. So the way we view the XU308 is more about, again, going back to my earlier point, that the efficiency of the market infrastructure to enable more efficiency and more effective trading in the spot market. It isn't about buying and locking up a whole bunch of a bunch of material to then potentially increase the price because you're, got your thumb on the scale of the demand and supply dynamics and you're worsening that potentially. It's about actually how do we use blockchain technology to create greater efficiency, hopefully greater liquidity with that when people see the benefits of being able to trade smaller lot sizes, trade 24/7, trade predominantly globally, subject to sanctions regimes, as I mentioned. And so actually it's not about locking up material and trying to sort of increase the price that way. It's about facilitating better trading mechanics to enable through blockchain technology and tokenization that really enable the market to be more efficient, which leads to a couple of things, right? That leads to greater price transparency, which should encourage more participants into the market. And we do believe that that will be the case, given the wider, again, we could do a whole episode on the wider nuclear thesis. I'm not sure many of your followers need to understand that. I'm sure a lot of them are familiar with it. But bringing more investors into the uranium trade is an interesting angle in of itself. But with what we hope will be greater liquidity through increased participation, actually what you do is move that dynamic out of a small sector of who's trading it right now is very small, right, in terms of bilateral deals between primary users like utilities and fuel buyers and miners, with brokers sat in the middle, and make that interesting from a wider investment thesis, wider infrastructure investor perspective, because they know and can model more effectively that price in the future. Maybe that increases the price, who knows? But with greater price transparency and greater certainty that there's markets for that material, we hope there's not an unreasonable case to be made that that can attract other external capital to not just fund the uranium trade, but also to fund mining activities and wider exploration activities, which longer term should be beneficial for the wider sector. So that is a long-term play, but we think that when you create more liquidity and more efficiency in that market that should enable that liquidity, that's the kind of wider attraction of capital that you've seen in other assets historically, and we've no reason to not believe that wouldn't happen here as well.
Right. That brings me to next question. Actually, a quote from one of my follower. He says, "Not enough network effect yet. My point was plenty of new exchanges have better designed tech, but fail because newcomers lack liquidity." How do you comment that?
Yeah, look, absolutely. And uranium has thrived in a sort of opaque relationship driven market to date. But what we see is, that by bringing improved technology, by using blockchain technology, so we think that we can bring in more capital that's currently sidelined. So, a pension fund, a family office, smaller hedge funds, even a retail investor has very few options beyond funds like SPUT. But we think we bring in an alternative ecosystem. It does take time to build that, but I think it goes back to the sort of core design principles, right, of enabling that physical delivery. If all you are is a financially settled product, then you kind of have that already in the market. But actually and you're never going to really become a mechanism for trading spot material. Whereas we think actually with what we've built enables that, and sort of that then should create those network effects over time. The demand is global, but the market access really isn't right now because you've got listed vehicles in certain jurisdictions. You've also, if you want to trade in the physical market, you've got those, what I would say is adverse network effects, because you have to have the relationships with brokers and the like, or you have to be participating in the nuclear supply chain. You've got high capital barriers, etc. All of those things that I'm sure many of your followers know. This is about expanding that universe, and with time, comes liquidity, we hope, but there's no guarantee of that. It's a valid challenge as it stands right now. But what we're doing is building a product and a set of capabilities and an ecosystem that we think can help attract that capital by providing greater utility. So, big announcements coming up. I not to get ahead of myself here, but there's two big things that we're building at the moment that will enable participants in the primary supply chain and value chain to engage in this with physical material themselves and make that accessible using blockchain technology. And so that creates potential liquidity capabilities for them that they otherwise wouldn't have had. And at the same time, we're looking, because we are using blockchain technology, what comes with that, and a big benefit of that is the wider utility of that material that comes through being part of a wider DeFi ecosystem. And to be really explicit about that, we've had very advanced conversations, and we expect to be making an announcement shortly about how you can not just hold XU308 as a means of, getting exposure to the physical material, but also use that to sort of to support other financial activities, whether that's borrowing or other types of DeFi capabilities, using your XU308 as collateral for that. So that's the other advantage we see by being plugged into a wider blockchain ecosystem that you wouldn't get if you're trading purely off-chain.
Yeah. How is the feedback from your current clients? Are there any questions that are repeating from them? Are there any current concerns or questions from them?
I think they currently echo a lot of what kind of your followers have been asking, which is, again, all very valid questions and things that I'm delighted to be here to be able to address and talk about, because I think we have designed something that is somewhat different to previous attempts in this space. We talked about Madison Metals, but also to the typical path of tokenization that many people will be familiar with. We haven't gone and created a special purpose vehicle and tokenized shares of that. And so what you have is reduced counterparty risk than you otherwise would have, and arguably reduced counterparty risk than what you have in the current off-chain mechanism for trading, because it's all embedded within, programmed within the smart contract, and it's all visible, the amount of physical material that's available and sort of supporting and underpinning the XU308 price. Whereas because it is OTC traded, you're reliant on kind of having a level of trust and due diligence being completed with any counterparties that you're trading with. The primary question, and it goes to that last question that you've asked, Lucian, which is really around how do we create this network effect, and how do we attract additional capital? How do we bring on additional venues for trading XU308? And I think right now, because we are on blockchain rails and blockchain infrastructure, that's been easier to do with our own platform, as well as, sort of Web3 or crypto-oriented centralized exchanges. So we announced last month that we'd gone live on 3 exchanges there. So we have 4 venues right now where this is tradable. We will be adding other venues. And that is spanning more into the neobank traditional investment platform space, because they're seeing now that actually we've spent a lot of time talking about the legal dynamics. They understand that this is spot commodity trading. So if they have gold and silver and palladium trading available on their platforms or their apps, uranium's an interesting case to add to that. And there's a strong narrative that can be told around that, as, again, we certainly know, and I'm sure a lot of your followers understand the whole dynamics around the wider nuclear and uranium thesis. So I think we get a lot of questions of, when are you available on this platform or on this venue? And we spend a lot of time trying to figure that out and hiring people to support us in doing that. And the other piece is, what about institutional demand? And I touched on that a little bit. We obviously have a partnership with Curzon Uranium in what we've been doing. And so that's brought us access to a number of people within the nuclear supply chain, not least Curzon themselves, and the uranium supply chain. So we're having that sort of led to this in-app tokenization of your own inventory process. And folks want to hear more about that, they can get in touch with us, but that will be going live shortly. And then the final piece is, how do I use this if I'm a traditional hedge fund or a traditional fund, and for whatever reason, SPUT doesn't do it for me. I like what you've built, but how do I get access to that? And so the final thing is, we've been working on how we move backwards from, the end point of market innovation, which we're seeing in other asset classes, i.e. tokenization. How do we then use the XU308 in more traditional financial products to broaden that market access even more? And so again, look out for announcements on that front too.
Yeah.
But I think, all in all, your followers not unsurprisingly have their finger on the pulse and reflect a lot of the questions that we're getting directly as well.
I look forward to see what are you cooking in your kitchen. So we will stay tuned. I read recently the forecast suggesting the tokenized asset market could reach 10 trillion by 2030. I know it's a hypothetical question, but how big do you expect the market for tokenized uranium to be, let's say, in the next 5 or 6 years?
It's super hard to forecast. But, I would like in the next 5 years, I'm not going to put a number on it because it could be, but my hope is, and my true belief is that we will see people using this as one of OTC trading will always exist and bilateral trading will always exist because there'll always be people with significant amounts of material where they want a bought deal, for want of a better phrase. But my hope is that this brings meaningful level in the next 5 years, maybe even sooner, meaningful levels of other capital that can't currently access the market or isn't currently accessing the market to the spot market, as well as being seen as a viable mechanism for trading spot material for people in the supply chain itself.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't think that is, based on the conversations we're having and the progress we're making, I don't think that's an unreasonable ambition in 5 years. We hope to realise that sooner. But, I've talked about this on the last interview as well, is that because of the mechanisms we've built with the physical delivery, with the ability to actually tokenize your inventory as well, which is the reverse of the redemption process, we truly do believe this could be a mechanism for actually just transacting in the spot market in the future. And very excited to talk to more people at the industry at events throughout the rest of the year and beyond.
Okay, Ben, how can people buy uranium?
Yeah, so right now you can buy XU308 through uranium.io, which is our website. That's got all the information about the project. There's all important proof of reserves are also on there, as well as information about how all of this works. So more succinct, perhaps, explanations of what I've said here. But we're also, as I said, live on 3 other trading venues if you would prefer to go through one of those. So KuCoin, Gate.io and Mexi. So we went live there in July, and all of that is the same XU308. We're just making that available on different venues. So there, depending on what you prefer, you can purchase it in either one of those, any of those venues, and keep a lookout for more venues of the traditional flavour, hopefully coming over the next months and into next year.
Excellent. Final question. WNA Symposium is around the corner, a few days left. Will you be there? Will your team be there? Will you present over there? Tell me more.
Yeah, we only launched in December, so it will be our first World Nuclear Symposium, but I'm pleased to say that we are there, and you'll be able to find us at a booth there. We'll be very brightly coloured. If you go onto uranium.io, you'll see our branding, so you can't really miss us. And love to connect with the wider sort of industry and have these direct conversations. We don't shy away. Transparency is critical for the success of this project, and happy to answer any questions any of your followers that are going to be there will have. And any other questions that maybe haven't come up that people have got in the front of their minds will be there. It won't just be me, it'll be me and the wider team. So, we should be able to answer any questions you have. We'll be demoing some of our new features that are coming out shortly, and love to get feedback on those before we hit the market with them. But very excited for the symposium overall, actually.
That was Ben Elvidge. Ben, see you in London soon.
See you then.